It was a quiet morning outside Buckingham Palace. The sky was grey, as if London itself hadn't woken up yet. A light mist was hanging in the air, the kind that sticks to your skin without even raining. Crowds had started to gather like they did every day. Tourists with cameras, families with children, people whispering and laughing quietly while pointing at the famous red uniforms and tall black hats of the Royal Guards. But Corporal James Fletcher wasn't looking at the crowd. He stood motionless in his post, one hand on the butt of his rifle, eyes straight ahead, not blinking too much, not letting his gaze wander. Discipline, control, silence. These were the rules. Even if a child made a funny face at him or a grown man tried to make him laugh, he wouldn't move. That was part of the job. A royal guard isn't supposed to show emotion. He's supposed to be like a statue. James had done this job for years now. From the outside it looked easy, just standing there, doing nothing. But inside, every guard was constantly alert, listening, scanning without turning their head, calculating every movement around them. Today, though, James had a feeling. Something just felt off. Across the street there was a black van parked in an unusual spot. Not exactly illegal, but not where vans usually stopped. It wasn't marked. No taxi signs, no delivery company logo, nothing. Just a plain black van with tinted windows. And what was more suspicious, no one had come out of it. For at least 15 minutes now, it had just been sitting there like a shadow watching the palace. James noticed it without moving his head. He had learned to use the edge of his vision, to pick up details like a hawk does when scanning from above. A guard isn't allowed to act unless something clearly breaks the rules. That's how it works. You don't move for guesses. But in his gut, James felt that the van wasn't just here by chance. He tried to calm his thoughts. Maybe it was just some tourist trying to avoid parking fees. Maybe someone inside was taking a nap or trying to find their GPS location. His job was not to chase ghosts. So he stayed still, eyes forward, heart steady. Then, it happened. A little girl in a yellow dress stepped away from the crowd. She must have been around 6 with curly brown hair and white sneakers. One moment she was holding her mother's hand, and the next she was walking freely, looking around like she was playing a game only she understood. No one seemed to notice. Her mother was distracted, pointing her phone at the palace gates, maybe trying to get the perfect selfie. The girl skipped happily, swinging her arms as if following something, someone. James's body tensed. She was headed straight for the street. And not just anywhere on the street. She was going toward that black van. James blinked once, just to be sure he was seeing it right. The van's side door, the sliding one, had started to open. Slowly, quietly, almost too perfectly timed. His instincts screamed louder than any training ever could. Children don't just walk into strange vans, not alone, not during crowded public hours. Something was wrong, very wrong, but James couldn't move without cause. Royal Guards are trained not to break formation unless there's a confirmed threat. But this wasn't the kind of thing you wait to confirm. He made a decision, one that could have cost him his job or saved a life. He broke formation. Tourists gasped, some raised their phones quickly, others froze. The red-uniformed soldier, known for never moving, was now walking, firmly, quickly with purpose, toward the little girl. James's boots hit the pavement with weight and intention. He didn't shout. He didn't panic. He walked like a man on a mission, rifle still in his hand but lowered, eyes locked on the girl. The little one stopped when she saw him. Her eyes got wide, not with fear but confusion, like she didn't know why he was walking toward her. She pointed at the van, smiling. "Uncle said there are puppies," she said softly. James's blood ran cold. Uncle? There was no uncle in sight. No man nearby. No one was calling her name. No one running after her with concern. Just that van. Still open. Still shadowy inside. James stepped between her and the van, blocking her view. He knelt down just slightly, lowering his voice. "Who told you to come here?" he asked carefully, trying not to scare her. She looked up with innocence. "He said there are puppies inside. He's waiting for me." James clenched his jaw. That's when he saw it. Inside the van, just past the sliding door, someone moved. A shape. A man. Not clear at first, but definitely there. His outline was just visible in the dim interior, hiding in the shadows, crouched like a predator. And then James caught a metallic flash. Something in the man's hand. Could have been a phone, could have been something much worse. James's body shifted into action mode. His heart was now racing, but his voice stayed calm. He tapped his radio subtly, alerting palace security with the emergency signal. He tightened his grip on the rifle, moving the little girl gently behind him. He called out loud enough for the man to hear. "Step out of the vehicle now!" There was no response. Then the man moved again, fast this time. He reached for something. James saw the motion, too practiced to be innocent. He pulled the rifle up, not pointing to shoot, but to show he wasn't bluffing. By now, 2 more guards had noticed the situation and were rushing toward him. One grabbed the little girl, holding her carefully, asking her name. She was scared now, clutching onto the guard's chest. James didn't take his eyes off the van. "Come out now," he barked again. And then the man ran. He leapt out the other side of the van, doors flying open, and took off down the street. He was fast, wore a hoodie, dark jeans. His face was half covered. But James saw him clearly, saw the fear, saw the guilt. The rifle stayed down. This wasn't a shoot-to-kill situation, but it could have been. As the man disappeared into the crowd, people screamed. Parents grabbed their children. Security sirens started wailing in the distance. A blur of confusion spread across the area, but James stayed locked in place, scanning, breathing hard, adrenaline surging. The little girl was safe. She didn't know how close she had come to disappearing forever. How close she had come to being just another case, just another picture on a missing poster. All because someone whispered the word, puppies. James felt a tight knot form in his chest. He looked back at the van, still open, now surrounded by police. They were inspecting it carefully, weapons drawn. A search began. The crowd was pushed back. The palace gates were sealed temporarily. James remained calm on the outside. But inside, he was shaking. What if he had hesitated? What if he had followed the rulebook and stayed still? He could have watched a child vanish in front of him. Instead, he had moved. He had trusted his gut. And now, everything had changed. That black van was no ordinary vehicle. And that man was no uncle. And James Fletcher, Royal Guard, disciplined, soldier trained to stay still, had just taken his first step into a nightmare no one saw coming. The moment the man ran from the van, everything shifted. The air, the silence, the way people looked around, it all changed. For Corporal James Fletcher, the line between his job and his instincts had just been crossed, and there was no turning back. But just because the danger was noticed didn't mean it was over. The little girl, Eliza, had been taken to the side by another palace guard. She clung to his chest, confused and scared, her face buried in his red uniform. Her soft voice kept repeating, "Where's my uncle? He said we'll see puppies." James heard that line echoing in his head like a haunting whisper. He said, "We'll see puppies." That one sentence told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't some lost family member waiting in the van. This was a setup, a trap, a child almost taken in plain sight. And James had almost watched it happen. He stood still for a moment, his rifle still in hand, his mind working fast. Behind him, other guards were closing off the area, pushing tourists back, calling for backup. But James's eyes were locked on the path the man had taken. The suspect had disappeared into the busy street, using the chaos and noise as a cover. Every second counted. Normally, a royal guard wouldn't pursue a suspect. That was the job of palace security or city police. But this wasn't a normal day. James had made the first move by breaking formation. Now he couldn't stop. His hands tightened on the rifle as he gave a quick nod to his superior officer nearby, who looked him in the eye and silently gave permission. And just like that, James took off. His boots hit the pavement hard, but he didn't run wildly. Every step was focused. He kept his weapon low, pointing it downward to avoid alarming more civilians, but his body language made it clear. This wasn't a drill. The suspect had a head start, but James had one advantage. He knew this area better than most. Growing up in South London, he'd spent his youth exploring back alleys and side roads. Now those same streets became a mental map. He guessed where the man would run, how he might try to escape, and where he might hide. Turning a sharp corner, past a newsstand, James saw him. The man was fast, ducking low, hoodie still up, cutting through a group of shocked tourists who barely noticed what was happening. James increased his speed, weaving through pedestrians, apologizing softly as he brushed past them. The man turned left suddenly, into a small alley between two old brick buildings. James followed. The alley was narrow and smelled like rain-soaked garbage. Bins were stacked to the side, and broken crates made the ground uneven. The man stumbled but kept running. James shouted, "Stop! Armed forces! Stop now, or I will use force!" But the man didn't listen. He just ran faster. James pulled his radio to call for backup, giving the direction quickly. Pursuit on foot, suspect heading north behind St. George's Cafe, armed and possibly dangerous. There was no time to wait. He pressed forward. The suspect reached the end of the alley and turned another corner, but this time he miscalculated. It was a dead end, blocked by a tall iron fence and constructions, barriers. James slowed down, approaching carefully. The man was trapped. He turned around quickly, pulling something from his hoodie. For one terrifying second, James thought it was a gun. He raised his rifle immediately, feet firmly planted. "Drop it!" he shouted. The man's hand froze. What he held wasn't a gun, but it wasn't innocent either. It was a syringe, a metallic, long-barreled injection device, modified, illegal, and terrifying. James had seen something like this during a training session about black market weapons used in kidnappings and human trafficking. The man held it tightly, shaking slightly. His eyes were wide, panicked. He wasn't just running from arrest, he was running from something else, something bigger. "Drop it!" James shouted again, his finger near the trigger, though not squeezing it yet. "This is your last warning!" The man trembled. Then suddenly he screamed, not at James, but at the empty air behind him. "They're going to kill me anyway! You don't get it, man! You don't get it! I was just doing what I was told!" James kept his weapon up, heart pounding. "Told by who?" "They'll find her," the man said, eyes wild. "Even if you stop me, they'll find her." And then he dropped the syringe. James kicked it away quickly and tackled the man to the ground, knee pressing down between his shoulder blades, arms pinned behind his back. Backup arrived seconds later. 3 officers with batons and body armor. One of them grabbed the syringe with gloves and placed it in an evidence bag. Another cuffed the suspect and began reading him his rights. But James wasn't thinking about justice. He was thinking about that little girl, Eliza. He walked back toward the palace slowly, now surrounded by flashing police lights and closed roads. The van had been towed to a secure location. Inside, investigators found something chilling. The back of the van was empty, but too clean, too prepared. It had thick insulation on the walls, a small cage hidden under blankets, a roll of duct tape, and worst of all, a packet of candy and dog stickers. It was all set up to make a child feel safe, make her trust what was about to happen. It wasn't a spontaneous crime. It was a plan. A carefully designed, practiced method to lure a child, just like Eliza. As the forensic team worked, James stood near the van, watching silently. An officer walked up to him. "We've seen setups like this before," he said, "but never so bold. Right outside the palace gates?" James didn't reply. He just stared at the cage inside the van, the empty space where a child could have disappeared forever. Later, in the debriefing room, he sat at a long table under fluorescent lights, his rifle placed to the side, uniform slightly wrinkled from the chase. A senior officer, one from the counter-trafficking unit, leaned forward. "You did the right thing, Fletcher. Most people wouldn't have noticed anything was wrong until it was too late." James shook his head. "I almost didn't. I almost followed the rules." The officer nodded. "That van was registered to a fake company address. The suspect isn't talking much, but we already found links to a wider group operating in Europe. It's possible he wasn't working alone." That sentence hit James hard. Not alone. That meant there could be more vans, more children, more uncles. He looked down at the report in front of him. A photo of the suspect, a blurry screenshot of the van, and Eliza's name, just 6 years old. Later that evening, before his shift ended, James visited the temporary room where Eliza was sitting with her mother. The woman was crying softly, holding her daughter close, unable to understand how close she had come to losing everything. Eliza looked up at James with big, round eyes. She smiled shyly and handed him a piece of paper. A drawing, crayon lines, a stick figure in a red uniform standing in front of a big black van. The figure was holding a long stick, a rifle, and beside him, a little girl in yellow. There was a speech bubble from the soldier's mouth. One word inside. No. James folded the paper gently, placing it in his pocket. He didn't need a medal. He didn't want the headlines. He just wanted to know that Eliza was okay, that she was going home tonight, not in a cage, not lost in some unknown country. Just home, with her mother. He walked outside the palace gates, the crowds mostly gone now. The mist had returned. London looked tired, like the city itself had been holding its breath. And James knew something deep in his bones. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Whatever was behind that van, behind that man, wasn't going to stop. There was a network out there, hidden in shadows, hunting innocents in the middle of the day. Using lies, stickers, candy, whatever it took, and he had seen it now. The mask had come off. For the first time in his career, James Fletcher wasn't just a soldier standing still. He was moving, and this time, he wouldn't stop until the shadows had nowhere left to hide. 3 days had passed since the van incident outside Buckingham Palace. On the surface, everything seemed back to normal. The guards had returned to their positions. Tourists were once again laughing, taking pictures, buying souvenirs. The red uniform stood tall like nothing had ever happened. But for Corporal James Fletcher, nothing was normal anymore. He hadn't slept properly in days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that little girl walking toward the van. He saw the syringe, the empty cage. The man's eyes filled with panic, not fear of getting caught, but fear of something worse. And that one sentence kept echoing in his mind. They'll find her. Who were they? And what did they want with a 6-year-old girl? The man who had tried to lure Eliza. His name was Nathan Cole. That's what the ID said, though even that was questionable. He was currently being held under tight security, but he wasn't speaking much. Whenever anyone asked him about the van, or the girl, or the syringe, he gave short, jittery answers. And one night, he tried to harm himself in the holding cell. James had been at the station when it happened. He had watched through the glass as Nathan was rushed away on a stretcher. And as the ambulance doors closed, Nathan looked up and locked eyes with James, and whispered something. "She's marked now." That was it, just 3 words. But they hit James like thunder. He tried to tell the officers. He told his supervisor. But everyone said the same thing. "It's just the ravings of a criminal. He's trying to get inside your head." But James didn't believe that. He had spent enough time in uniform to know when a man was lying and when a man was truly scared. Nathan wasn't scared of prison. He was scared of whatever he had been working for. The case was technically out of James's hands now. Scotland Yard had taken over, along with counter-trafficking agencies. They were tracing the van, checking nearby CCTV footage, interviewing witnesses. But all the footage from the area around the van had a strange error. The cameras facing that direction had glitched during the most critical 20 minutes. Someone had disabled them. Not with a hammer or a spray can, with software. Professional level interference. That kind of thing doesn't happen by accident. That night, James sat alone in his apartment. The crayon drawing from Eliza was still on his kitchen table. The little red soldier, the black van, the word no. He stared at it for a long time. Then he opened his laptop and searched for something he wasn't sure he wanted to find. Child abduction cases near royal landmarks, patterns, black vans, unmarked vehicles. And what he found chilled him. Over the past 7 months, there had been 6 reported cases of attempted child luring within half a mile of historic sites across Europe. Eiffel Tower, Colosseum, Berlin Gate. In each one, the story was almost the same. A man appears, says there are animals inside a van. Puppies, kittens, even ponies. The child follows. The adult vanishes before anyone can catch him. 2 children were rescued in time. 4 were never seen again. The pattern was clear, but no one had connected it yet. James printed the files and took them to someone he trusted. Detective Sarah Millen. She wasn't part of Palace security, but they had worked together once during a terror alert drill. She was smart, quiet, and didn't waste time with red tape. When she saw the files, she leaned back slowly in her chair. These cases were never tied together. Different countries, different agencies. But the method, it's identical. James nodded. And Nathan Cole mentioned something about Eliza being marked. What if it's not just random? What if the children are being tracked, chosen? Sarah raised an eyebrow. You mean before the attempt happens? Yes, James said. What if they knew who she was before she arrived at the palace? Sarah didn't dismiss the idea. Instead, she got up and pulled a tablet from her desk. After a few minutes of typing, she showed James something else. Eliza's social media trail. Her mother had posted pictures of their vacation in London. One of the photos was taken outside the palace gates, just an hour before the incident. Hashtag Eliza in London public location tag enabled. Anyone could have seen it. Anyone could have known she was there. James leaned back, heart sinking. They weren't just waiting randomly in a van. They had come for her. Sarah dug deeper. There's more, she said. In every one of those past cases, there was a public post before the child was targeted. Always geotagged, always recent. These people are watching. So it's not just human trafficking, James muttered. It's organized surveillance. They spent hours digging. More connections formed. Fake accounts commenting on family posts, posing as well-wishers, asking innocent questions, and then disappearing. They were marking children. And suddenly, James remembered something small, something that had felt strange at the time. When Eliza pointed to the van, she said, "Uncle said there are puppies." Uncle. Not a man. Not a stranger. Uncle. As if she had spoken to him before. Online? James checked the mother's profile again. One of her recent posts had a comment from a man with a friendly profile picture. Username Uncle Ben London. The account was deleted now. but the name lingered. He told Sarah. She checked with cybercrime teams. They found fragments of deleted messages, ones that seemed harmless at first glance. "Hey, Eliza, hope you're having fun in London. Bet you love puppies." Simple, sweet, deadly. That's when it all became real. Eliza hadn't walked to the van by accident. She had been groomed, slowly, carefully, over days or weeks. Someone had contacted her through a fake account pretending to be a family friend. Building trust. So when she saw the van and heard a voice calling, it wasn't a stranger calling her. It was someone she thought she knew, and the only reason she was still alive was because one royal guard broke the rules. James felt sick, angry, but most of all, determined. He asked Sarah the one question that mattered now. How many other kids could be marked right now? She didn't have a number, but she had a lead. One of the fake profiles they traced had been active in multiple countries, always just before another child was taken. The account's IP pinged last in Manchester, a location. Finally, Sarah arranged for surveillance. James insisted on going. "I'm not a detective," he said, "but I started this, and I'm not going to sit this one out." Sarah gave him a bulletproof vest. When they arrived in Manchester, the flat they raided was empty, but inside they found walls covered in photographs, children's faces, printed from social media, notes under each photo, age, name, favorite color, recent, location, a network board showing airports, tourist sites, and local playgrounds, and in the middle of it all, one chilling sentence was written in bold red ink, marked for collection. James stared at it. His throat felt dry. There were more vans, more uncles, more traps already set. And the worst part? On the table near the wall there was a new photo. Freshly printed. Eliza, again, marked with a red circle. She was still a target, even after the failed attempt. James picked up the photo, his hands trembling. "They don't stop, do they?" he said, softly. Sarah's face was grim. "No. And now that they failed, they might come faster. Clean up their mess." James looked at her with fierce eyes. "Then we don't wait. We fight back." They packed every photo, every file, every name. Back in London, James was granted temporary clearance to assist the task force. He wasn't just a guard anymore, he was a hunter, and Eliza's name had lit the fire. The quiet man who once stood still like a statue outside the palace gates was now chasing shadows through the cracks of Europe, because the truth was finally clear. This wasn't one van, one man, one day. This was a machine, and it had just been seen for what it truly was. It had been almost a week since Corporal James Fletcher had pulled Eliza back from the van. 1 week, and yet it felt like a whole lifetime had passed. His days no longer started at the palace gates. His mornings didn't begin with tourist chatter and stiff posture. He was now inside the world behind the curtain, a world most people didn't even know existed. The walls of that world were cold and quiet, but the danger inside them screamed. He was now part of a temporary joint task force, working with Sarah Millen and other investigators. And their mission was clear: track down the people behind the abductions, break their network, and protect the children on the list, especially the ones already marked. Eliza's name was still on the top. The first few days were like chasing ghosts. They followed one lead after another: flats rented under fake names, VPN logs, burner phones. Every time they got close, the trail went cold. These people weren't just criminals. They were organized, smart, invisible. Every step they took was carefully hidden behind layers of fake identities, foreign bank accounts, and erased digital footprints. But then something changed. A quiet breakthrough came from a blurry photo. A tourist had unknowingly captured the suspect, the man who tried to take Eliza, in the background of a family selfie at a London train station, just 3 days before the incident. But he wasn't alone. He was standing next to another man, holding a folder. The photo was zoomed in, enhanced, and analyzed by facial recognition software. The man beside him had a name, Viktor Novik, a former intelligence operative from Eastern Europe, dishonorably discharged, known for working in private security after leaving his agency. But here's what caught Sarah's attention. He had vanished off-grid 6 years ago. No known address, no tax records, just a shadow. And now he had resurfaced, next to a child trafficker. The team dug deeper. They found that Victor had recently crossed into France using a false passport. But more importantly, they traced a money trail, large transactions coming from a shell company that funded logistics, vans, phones, storage units. James stared at the documents. Vans. Again, he whispered. Sarah nodded. He's not just part of the operation. He's organizing it, coordinating pickups and routes. If we find him, we find the core of it. So they moved. Quietly. Carefully. No headlines, no press, just long hours, silent messages, and unmarked cars. They followed Victor's trail to Calais, a port city in France. There, they found a garage that had been recently rented under another fake name. Inside the garage, 2 vans, one of them already loaded, with what looked like travel supplies. But one van had something hidden beneath its floor, a second cage. Smaller, soundproof. James felt something heavy drop in his chest. He didn't say a word. He just stared at the metal trap like it had personally insulted him. Sarah walked around it slowly. This wasn't for animals. No one responded. They didn't need to. It was clear what it had been used for. They found fingerprints, DNA traces. But the biggest find was a burned note in a trash bin near the corner, half destroyed, but still readable. London, failed. Next. Rotterdam. 14th. That was 2 days from now, Rotterdam. A busy Dutch port city, international, crowded. The perfect place to disappear. But disappear with who? That night, James couldn't rest. His thoughts kept returning to Eliza. Not just her, but the photo of the board they had found earlier, the one with dozens of kids. One of the faces, a boy named Adam from Belgium, had also been circled twice. Sarah ran a fast check. Adam's family had posted vacation photos yesterday, Rotterdam Zoo. It clicked instantly. James turned to Sarah. They're going to try again. But this time, it's not Eliza. Sarah nodded. They switched the target. Same method, different city. The clock had started ticking. They flew into Rotterdam undercover, arriving just after midnight. The local police had already been informed. Surveillance was discreetly set up around the zoo and its nearby exits. And James? He waited. It was strange how the life of a soldier trained for war could suddenly become about playgrounds and missing children. He used to think that standing still in front of the palace was the hardest part of his duty. Now he knew the real test was waiting, knowing danger was near, but not knowing when it would strike. By morning, the park had opened. Tourists walked in, kids laughed, balloons floated, and somewhere inside that crowd, a predator was watching. The team worked silently. Plain clothes, earpieces. Sarah had her tablet open, watching live camera feeds. James was near the entrance, scanning every adult who stood too long near the fences. Too still. Too alone. At 11:42 a.m., a voice came through the radio. We've got eyes on the mother. She's near the penguin exhibit. The child is with her. James made his way there quickly, avoiding attention. He saw them. A woman with a young boy, about 6, laughing, holding his hand. And then he saw someone else, a man, dressed casually, holding an ice cream cone, watching them, smiling like any tourist, but not blinking, not eating the ice cream, just waiting. James whispered into his radio. Possible contact. South fence near Penguins. The man moved forward slowly. He passed the boy, dropped something. A card. The boy picked it up. The mother turned around to ask something. The man smiled and walked away. James closed the distance fast, his eyes locked on the card in the child's hand. He knelt. "Hey, buddy, can I see what you found?" The boy handed him the card. It had a cartoon puppy on it. On the back, directions. An address. No name, just, "Come see the puppies here." James's breath froze. He stood up and locked eyes with the man now almost at the park exit. "Got him," he said, running. The chase began. But this one was different. The man knew the park. He weaved through the crowd with speed and confidence. He wasn't panicking like Nathan had. He was trained. James followed, heart racing, legs burning. The man exited the park and turned into a side road. James gained on him, shouting, "Stop! British Armed Forces! Stop now!" The man pulled something from his coat. It wasn't a gun. It was a remote. His thumb hovered over it. James didn't think. He launched forward and tackled the man to the ground, knocking the remote from his hand. They rolled, fists flying. The man was stronger than expected. He hit back with trained precision, but James was faster. Backup arrived just in time. They pinned him down and cuffed him. The remote, when analyzed later, was connected to a van parked 2 blocks away. Inside, another cage, and a clock timer wired to release a gas canister. Not just kidnapping, but cover-up. If the abduction failed, the child would be silenced. James sat on the pavement, breathing hard, covered in bruises, but alive. The van was secured. The boy was safe. The mother cried in relief. And the man? He stayed silent, even when questioned, even when threatened with years of prison. Only once did he speak, quietly, to James. "You can't save them all." James didn't reply. He just walked out, tired, angry, but more certain than ever. Because even if he couldn't save them all, he had saved this one, and he would keep saving whoever came next, even if it meant walking straight into the heart of the darkness himself. The months that followed were some of the hardest in Corporal James Fletcher's life. Every day brought new challenges, new names, new faces on the list of children at risk. The network behind the van, the cages, the uncles, the coded messages was larger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. It wasn't just a criminal group. It was an international ring that had carefully planned for years, moving silently in the shadows. And James was now part of the fight to bring it down. The day after the Rotterdam incident, the task force held a meeting in a secure room hidden inside a government building. Maps, photos, and files were spread across the table like a complicated puzzle waiting to be solved. Sarah sat across from James, her eyes tired but focused. "We've identified 4 more potential targets in the UK alone," she said quietly. "And that's just what we know. There are dozens more on the lists we found in that flat." James rubbed his face, feeling the weight of every child's name. "How do we stop it?" he asked. Sarah looked at him seriously. "We can't stop all of them at once. But we can cut the head off the snake. Viktor Novick. He's the mastermind. If we get him, the network will collapse." James nodded. It was simple in theory, but dangerous in practice. Viktor was smart and ruthless. He had spies everywhere and contacts in powerful places. Catching him meant risking everything. Days later, new intelligence came in. A shipment was being prepared to move from a warehouse near the Channel Tunnel. The team suspected it was the next step in the trafficking chain, a group of children being moved across borders. James volunteered to lead the operation. He and a team of officers arrived at the warehouse just before dawn. The air was cold and heavy with mist. Inside, workers moved about quietly, unaware of the law enforcement watching from the shadows. James's heart pounded as he spotted the vans, similar to the ones they had seen before. Black, unmarked, with no logos or signs. As the workers loaded boxes into the vehicles, the team moved in swiftly. The raid was fast and loud. Shouts echoed through the warehouse as officers shouted orders. Behind one of the vans, James found the small cages again, empty but freshly cleaned. Something was missing. They searched the whole warehouse, but the children had already been moved. Frustration hit James like a punch to the gut. He couldn't stop thinking about the little faces on the photos. Children who had vanished. Children who were still out there, scared and alone. That night, James sat alone in a small room, staring at the files again. The words from the captured trafficker echoed in his mind. You can't save them all. But James refused to accept that. He thought about Eliza, the little girl who had unknowingly become the spark that lit the fire. Because of her, the task force had started moving, uncovering clues that had been hidden for too long. And now it was time to take the fight directly to Victor. The team tracked Victor to a luxury villa on the outskirts of Amsterdam. He had been living in hiding, protected by hired guards and state-of-the-art security systems. They planned the raid carefully. James felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as they approached the villa late at night. Dressed in black, the team moved silently through the shadows. Suddenly, lights flashed. Alarms blared. The operation was underway. Gunfire erupted. James dove behind a wall as shots whizzed past him. He felt the cold metal of his rifle in his hands and aimed carefully. Inside the villa, chaos exploded. Victor tried to escape but was cornered in the basement. He was caught, handcuffed, and finally silenced. But the victory was bittersweet. In the basement, the team found more cages, more notes, this time with new names and dates. Names they didn't recognize. James felt a deep sadness. The network was bigger than they imagined. Still, Victor's capture was a blow to the traffickers. Back in London, the press broke the story. James saw the headlines. Royal Guard helps stop child trafficking ring. Heroes behind the scenes. But James knew the truth. The real heroes were the children, the survivors who had been brave enough to escape, the families who refused to give up, and the small soldiers like him who stood guard in the shadows. He visited Eliza and her family a few weeks later. She was shy at first, hiding behind her mother's legs, but when James showed her the little red soldier drawing she had given him, her face lit up. "You saved me," she said quietly. James smiled. "I just stood where I had to." But in his heart, he knew it was. More than that, sometimes a single decision, the choice to act, to stop, to protect, could change everything. And sometimes, even the smallest guard could stop a shadow.